G'day and welcome to UAVfutures. Almost forgot my name there for a second. G'day, welcome to UAVfutures. Today we are making one of these. It's a micro FPV quadcopter and it is amazing and it was so easy to build. I was a little bit nervous about jumping into micros and seeing how it'd go. I built a few quads before in the past but nothing as small as this. And this is the easiest one I've done. So if soldering freaks you out, this is definitely the easiest build you can do. So it has minimal soldering and it just sort of clicked together like Lego. Well, let's get started. You're going to need a frame, flight controller, a video transmitter and an antenna, an FPV camera, a receiver, some motors, 2 clockwise and 2 counterclockwise, a battery. It's really recommended that you have a voltage regulator. Of course, you're going to need some props. I don't know if you can see those clear ones there very well. So I've got some different props here. I'll just set those there for the moment. And you're going to need some sort of way to distribute your power, or just like a wire harness or something like that. In addition to all that, you're going to need some goggles or some sort of FPV gear, a ground station, a little screen or some of these, and you're also going to need a radio or a transmitter. So I've got the Tyrannus here, and that's what we're going to be using in this. Straight up, the first thing that you need to decide is what sort of frame do you want to put your micro in. Now, I've done some other reviews on other frames in the past, but I wanted to do something special with this build. So I've got the Micro H carbon frame, and it's 135 millimeters. So you can see this one, it's got a lot of space in here to build on, so this is going to be perfect for our FPV platform. For my flight controller, I'm using the legendary Alien Wii board. Good luck if you can find one of these. They're highly sought after, but if you can't find one of these, you can also, a good replacement is the Beef's brush board, and I'll have some links for these sorts of things all down in the description. Now, a bit more on this receiver. This is the Lemon RX satellite, and I decided to choose this because this is a high quality receiver, but you need a module to get this to work as well if you're using a Tyrannus. For all the FPV goodness, I'm choosing this little camera here. It's the ultralight 520 FPV camera, and this thing only weighs 3 grams, so that's going to be awesome because we're trying to keep the weight down as much as possible. Now, on the other end of that camera, you need to be running your VTX, and this is the 400 milliwatt little Boss Cam transmitter, and I've just soldered on here. You can see attached is the FPV antenna as well, just a cloverleaf antenna there. If you don't feel comfortable soldering, you can also just get one of these little micro FPV cameras from Spectrum, and it's just pretty much plug and play. Now, for the thing that actually makes it fly, you're going to need some motors. So make sure when you get these, they usually come in sets, that you get 2 clockwise and 2 counterclockwise. Because these are brush motors, they need to go in a certain direction or else it can actually damage the motor. And I guess the disposable part of this hobby, like we all know, you need to buy lots of these, is some props. Now, these are Parrot props. Just here, Parrot mini drones. So it's for the rolling spider. Now, these are really good props, but they're about $10 for a set of 4. Or if you want to get something a bit cheaper, these clear plastic Hubsan props are the bomb. They're really strong, a lot stronger than the red, black, what other colors, white ones of the Hubsans. So if you're going to get Hubsans, get the clear ones because they're much, much stronger. The voltage regulator, you don't need one of these, but it's strongly recommended because it cuts out all that noise that's produced by these high kV motors. So this will make your FPV footage like so much better. It'll make it a lot more enjoyable. So I really, really recommend getting one of these, and they're only like $3 anyway. Now, I've got a wire harness here, and this is going to be a great way that I can connect my camera, my VTX, connect it to my board, and also to my voltage regulator. So it's kind of like a power distribution board, just a lot lighter because it's micros and a lot simpler. And don't worry, you don't have to make these. I'll provide a link for these. You can buy these just like this as well. You're going to need a 1S LiPo. Now I'm using a 40C LiPo, which is a pretty high discharge rate. Here that means that we're going to have plenty of oomph, and these ones are 480 milliamp hours. And finally, I've got these motor feet here, which should provide a little bit of protection, you know, in some of our crashes, because we don't want to bust our motors. Alright, that's all the boring bits out of the way. Let's get to it. So the first thing that I'm going to do, a lot of frames you can just use this bottom plate, but I want to build the whole thing and I want to have a proper little cargo bay to hold all the stuff. So I'm just going to put this little frame together. It's pretty easy. All you've got to do is attach these little nylon standoffs using some little bolts and stick it all together. It's really straightforward. Okay, now this frame actually comes with some little motor mounts just here that bolt to it, and you're going to need to use a little bit of Loctite just in case. Kind of just good practice anyway for your multi-copters to be using a little bit of Loctite. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that just here. Use the blue stuff, not the red stuff, so you'll be able to get it off. Otherwise the red stuff is going to seize it up if you ever need to change it. And all you do is dip your little bolt in the Loctite and pop it through. Gee, you need tiny hands for this. And pop it on. I'll probably fast forward this so you don't have to watch this, and I'll be back once I get all 4 of these suckers on here. Ta-da! So you can see this on here. Man, that was such a mission trying to get these on here. These bolts are absolutely tiny, but once they're on here they're not going to come off, and also because they're so small it should save a lot of weight. One of the little mods that I'm going to be doing on this frame is I've got these little standoffs that come with it in the back, and they're probably about 10 millimeters high, and I'm actually going to drill out these holes just a little bit. They're 2 millimeters at the moment, and I'm going to drill it with a 2.5 millimeter, and that's going to let me put some bigger standoffs in the front, which will allow me just to have a little bit of a slope on the top there, and just enough room to put my FPV camera in here with a little bit of a tilt as well. So you don't have to do that, but that's what I'm going to do for this build. Alright, so the next thing that I need to do is just prep my board just here. What I need to do, I need to actually take this connector off, because these batteries that I'm using actually are a JST connector, and so I need to switch that out so they can plug in just here. So a little tip that I like to do is just use a bit of blue tack or glue tack, whatever you guys call it, and should make it a little bit easier to remove those things there. Hopefully, that's the plan anyway. So as always, clean your tip of your soldering iron, tiny little bit of solder. That's one end. Just give it a little pull. Done. Alright, so it's really not hard at all. Now that I've desoldered those battery leads, I need to decide how long do I want my new battery lead to be when I put it inside my frame. Excuse that laptop beeping just there. So if I mount my flight controller there, and I've got my battery strapped in the middle underneath, I'm going to give myself about that much room. So I'm going to cut this back to about here. I've got my lengths. I want my battery lengths to be about this long. Just nice little cut, and then we're going to strip these just off a little bit. About there. Ooh, probably not good anymore. There we go. And I'll tin those up. If you've got a helping hand, that works great as well. I do have a helping hand, I just can't be bothered to get it out. There you go. Alright, I'm going to tin my board again, just so they solder on a bit easier when I put these new wires on. You just want to get in and out as quickly as you can. Don't hang around with solder because it's probably going to get damaged. And double check my polarity. So on the alien board, this side here closest to the receiver pins or receiver wires is the negative. And just put the other one on here. Stop moving. Now what I'm going to actually do, why I've got my board here prepped like this, I'm going to actually add this little sort of plug here on the back side. It's still just the same as a power plug, but it's not for the battery. That's so I can plug my little sort of power harness in here that can feed my FPV gear. But by making this little plug here that, I've got a few things going on here, that attaches here, that's going to let me take my FPV gear off and it can make it modular if I don't want to use it. So it's going to allow me to transplant my FPV gear to other micros if I feel like it. Just a nice little feature to have. Once again, I'm checking my polarities. And I know that this is ground. If you don't want to do this, you can just straight up solder your little wire harness straight to the board without the plug. So what'll happen, this little plug here will let me plug in my VTX, my VTX will go there, my camera will be here, and my power regulator. And if I don't want to use that, I can just simply disconnect it here, and I don't have to use any of that stuff, and I can transplant that to another micro. Here's another little tip. So because this is a micro and I've got two receivers here, I do want to use this one. It's absolutely tiny, and if you've got a Tyrannus, which I do, this will bind natively to it, so you don't need any extra module or anything like that. But I think I really want to use, I've got a module coming and I really want to use this Lemon RX satellite in mine, so I'm going to stick with this one. But if you've got a Tyrannus, by all means feel free to use one of these micro FRXs, and I'll put, there's a link and all that sort of stuff down below. But I'm going to use this one, and because it's a micro as well, I don't need all this plastic on here or any of this sort of junk, so I'm going to try and keep the weight down, and I'm going to open it up. Hopefully. Alright, I've got it now. Here we go. There's our little receiver. Absolutely tiny. And it's got diversity too, which is great. And this is just going to sit on top of our board like this. Alright, so there's my flight control board and my receiver. Next thing we're going to look at is our little FPV setup here. So we want to figure this out before we put it inside our micro frame. So I've got my little power harness here. You're going to need your voltage regulator, your VTX, and your camera. Now, if we look here, you're going to need some way to power it all, which is this plug here with the two wires. You're going to need it running to your voltage regulator, which will be this one just here. And you got to check which one is the voltage in. So this one's coming straight from my battery. So that's going to be my voltage in. So you can see that says voltage in, and then my voltage out, which is this one just here, is going to be running to my camera and to my VTX. So we're going to connect those up. So up. And it pays, always check your polarity when you're doing these, because if you plug these around the wrong way, you're going to let the magic smoke out. So there's my VTX plugged in, and I can see that there's my positive, the ground wires in the middle, and the signal wires on the outside. And I'm going to match that as well with the camera. So positive, ground, and signal on the outside. The signal changes from yellow to white in here, but as long as the positives are lined up and the grounds are lined up. Alright, now we need to find a way to put this inside the frame somehow. I'm just going to sort of wrap all the wires up like this and have it sitting, except for this one, because that's what's going to power the FPV system. Have it sitting at the back of the frame somehow like that. So I think I might actually stick these down. Make sure when you're putting down your VTX that, see all these ports here, well, carbon fiber is conductive, so if any of these touch here, it can short across the carbon fiber and everything will go to hell. So you need to make sure that none of this is having contact with the carbon fiber. Okay, the next thing we want to do is lay our board out so we can put all our components on here. So I'm going to use some double-sided tape. This is just the stuff you use, I think it's to stick posters and stuff on the wall. Oh gosh. Peel this off. I'm going to sit this right at the back here for the VTX. Squish that down. And I'm going to want to put my video transmitter about here and my voltage regulator there. So we'll put those on. So peel off this sticky bit here. This will be good too, because this tape will insulate these contacts here, because carbon fiber is conductive. Putting that about there looks good. And the same for my VTX. Not VTX. Voltage regulator, putting that on. I'm going to leave a little bit of space between them in case this heats up. It's still a little bit away from that, because these things can get pretty hot. Alright, and I'm going to connect my voltage reg. Gee, maybe I should have connected this before. There's a tip. Video transmitter. Remember to double check your polarities there. And this one's going to be for the camera. There's the camera. And we're going to want to mount it. So that's looking all good. I'm going to actually leave the camera off for a little bit. We're going to mount our flight controller. So same sort of thing, just a little bit of double-sided tape. Put that across here. So I put a bit more double-sided tape on here for the flight controller. I'm going to stick that down here, trying to keep that as center as I can to the middle of the frame. It's good we've got the receiver on top. And then pretty much we're almost done. I'm going to need some sort of way to mount my camera at the front here. I want it on a little bit of an angle, so I'm going to stick a little piece of foam in here. This is just off one of the things that just a bit of foam that came in like an old 250 motor case. I'm going to use that foam there. So I'm going to figure out some way to mount that there. That's pretty much everything that goes in our little frame. Now I want this to be a pretty neat build, so what I'm going to actually do, I'm just going to actually duct tape, electrical tape for some, so don't get in trouble. I'm going to electrical tape just these little cords here together. Just keep it a bit neater so they're not running all over the place. Now before we stick our top plate on, the last thing that we need to do is to connect our motors. So we've got to put these in the right places. So you've got clockwise and counterclockwise motors, and you can tell that by the colour of the wires here. So these brush motors are only meant to run in one direction. Alright, so on these motors, red and blue are clockwise and white and black are counterclockwise. And I'm just going to push these in here from the bottom up and connect them into these little ports here, which correspond to these motors. They're a pretty tight fit. I'm just going to push them up, till they're just coming out the top. So there's our motors in place, and I'm going to connect these up just here. And remember that black is always the ground. So if you're in doubt and you're not sure, black is always the ground, and red is usually always the positive. Alright, I'm going to use a little bit of duct tape and tape these in. I really like electrical tape on these little builds because I think it's a bit lighter than heat shrink. Alright, some little tips before we put the top on here, before we put the top plate on. I'm just going to put a little blob of glue on my receiver antennas to help strengthen them so they don't snap off with all the vibrations. What else am I going to do? I'm going to put and some other little blobs here just where the motors join the board, just to stop those snapping off in case there's a hard impact or something like that, which I'm sure with my flying there's going to be. Alrighty. A lot of this gluey spider webs around. Alright, so the last thing we want to do before we put the top on, I've just checked with this camera, just plugged it in and had a little sneak peek, and you want this power sticker to be facing it at the top, because that means it's the correct orientation, because you don't want to put this all together, turn it on, and then realize that you're looking to the side or you're looking upside down. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue just here, and also just a little bit at the bottom. They're ready to go. And I want it mounted on a little bit of an angle. So if anyone has a little plastic 3D printed mount or anything like that they want to design for one of these, please let me know where I can get one, because at the moment this is the best solution that I could come up with, glue and foam. And just to make it that little bit extra sturdier, I'm just going to put a little zip tie over the back of this camera so it keeps that angle up. You can see the angle there. So I don't want that to come off though in a crash. So I'm going to put a little zip tie through here. I'm going to start the zip tie from this side. Snip that off. Alright, now all I need to do is put this top plate on and some props on. So I'm just about to put the top plate and the props on, but just before I do, I've cut this little bit of foam here and I'm going to sandwich that just at the back between the antenna and the VTX, just underneath the plates. And the idea is there that in a crash, in a really hard crash, I don't want to snap this off the bottom of my VTX. So instead, hopefully, that absorbs some of the impact and just puts the stress on the middle part of the antenna rather than the connection where it joins. Now, I seem to have lost my little Allen key because that's not the right size. So 1 second. Alright, I have no idea where that little Allen key is, because this place is a mess and I really need to clean it up, but I'm sure it's going to turn up. Aha! Found my Allen key. You'll never guess where it was. It's just here. It's stuck to these motors, the jerk. So after cleaning up and spending way too long looking for it, I finally found it. Right, so the last thing we need to do is we're going to put some props on here and then put some little caps on the bottom to protect our motors. So a little tip when you're going to put your props on to stop them flying off. If you get an old motor, an old busted motor, really jam it in there before you put it on. And you want to press them down as far as you can onto the motor shafts. So there is no gap there. Because what that's going to do, if you have a crash upside down, you want this to hit the top of the motor here instead of busting the bottom out, because that'll wreck the motor. If you use these parrot props as well, you need to be careful that it doesn't clip here on the frame, and if that happens, all you need to do is push this motor up just that little bit extra higher, so it probably maybe 1 or 2 millimeters till it clears that. The Hubsan props though, that have no problems at all clearing that. It's just these ones are a little bit bigger. So I'm going to use these. So I'm going to push it up a little bit more. Maybe that far. And there we go. There's our clearance. So we've got the C props on the back. Now these props come in two styles. There's the normal and reverse. So in the Parrot ones they're called A and C, and in Hubsan for some reason they're called A and B, which I think sounds a lot easier to understand. You just need to make sure that you've got the right props on the right motors. Otherwise it's going to flip over, it's not going to take off, or just a whole mixture of things. Okie dokie. So the last thing to do, when it's a little bit optional, I want to do it because I want to protect my motors, is you can put some little of these motor feet on the bottom. So I'm just going to put our motor feet on here, and they just slide over the top. Now I think that's a bit long, so I'm going to actually trim these down a little bit with some scissors. 1, 4. Ta-da! And there's my micro. And once this scale resets, check out its weight. And we're coming in at 58 grams, right on the line there between the two. Now to secure the battery, what I'm going to do is use some of these little rubber bands or loom bands or bracer bands. Well, you can use whatever you like, but I find these work really well. So we'll slide these on here. Probably should have done this before I put the props on, but anyway, we'll figure it out. We'll get there. You also want to be careful that you don't damage those little receiver antennas on the side as well when you're sliding these rubber bands over. Put this through here. And voila, there's our micro. So with the battery coming in at 73 grams. Rightio, so that's about all there is to building it. In the next video I'm going to show you how to hook up the flight controller to the computer and set it all up, and also how to bind the receiver to the module that comes that we're going to stick in the back of our Tyranus. Alright, see you soon. Happy flying! For more videos on micros and other FPV related content, subscribe, and as always, happy flying! I didn't shoot this scene about me.